Greetings, travelers. I'm your host, the C-Dot that knows a lot, Dr. Waluigi. When it comes to collecting anything, I find that you have to be careful in what you want to collect, as when you eventually discover anything that is considered rare in any collection, those items might not be worth the money you paid for, or the critics who talk about these items might make them seem better than they actually are. In the case of this review, I had finally found a copy of what many people consider to be one of the best video games on the NES. And after playing it myself, I can safely say that while I found this game enjoyable, it didn't live up to the high expectations that I was expecting with how many people had come to praise this golden nugget, and it wound up being very mediocre. This is my review of one of the golden treasures on the NES, Little Samson. The game was developed by Takeru, published by Taito, and released to North America in November of 1992. I couldn't find any games that I recognized from Takeru, but Taito is well known for creating arcade classics like Space Invaders and Bubble Bobble, as well as continuing to release games to this day. However, several of their games are known for the fact that they are some of the most expensive video games on the NES, and this game is no exception. The two reasons for this game's infamously high price is that the game was very poorly marketed upon its release, to the point that I couldn't find a commercial, let alone news from any Nintendo Power issues, and the second, as well as the main reason, is that the game had only been sold to Blockbuster and other video rental stores due to the game being released well after the NES's lifespan, which meant that the only way to play or even own this game was to rent it or buy the game when Blockbuster sold copies of the game to make room for new games. However, despite the game's massive price tag, many gamers still seek it out as it's considered one of the best games on the NES. And while I do have my own nitpicks on the game, I do think that there are some good elements that make the game worth playing, if you can find it for a decent price. The game takes place in the Kingdom of Forgy, a place of peace that has lasted for several hundred years, until one day when the evil demon Prince of Darkness, Takid, was freed from his prison. Now, in desperate times, the current emperor sends out his soldiers to find the four heroes who hold the legendary bells to help save their world. Can these four heroes save the world from the evil Takid? And what secrets do these bells have to reseal Takid back into his prison? Despite coming out over 30 years ago, the game still looks pretty amazing. I like that the in-game character art looks very anime-esque, looking similar to something from a Clamp series, and the backgrounds have this mix of Mario 3 and Mega Man to them, which I find interesting as the game's design was possibly inspired by games like Mega Man and Blaster Master, which are both games that I enjoy for being able to use the environments of the game's world to teach the player the ins and outs of getting through each of the levels you traverse. However, if there's one thing about the presentation that I'm not a fan of, it's that the box and cover art for the cartridge looks stupid. Don't get me wrong, I do like how some of the monsters and the characters surrounding Little Samson are drawn just fine, but the main character, Little Samson himself, looks like he belongs on a Garbage Pail Kids trading card and not as what is considered to be one of the best video games covers. I'm aware that the cover art was done by Greg Winters, who did the cover art for Mega Man 3 and 4, but those covers at least tried to emulate Mega Man's design. This, on the other hand, looks really ugly and kind of creepy. But like I said, that's just a minor nitpick compared to the rest of the game's design. But how does the gameplay feel? This is a game where, while it is very reminiscent of other platformers of the time, it does do some things a little differently that does help the game stand out. The game starts out with you picking one of the 4 different playable characters to play a practice level so you know what each character can do. With Samson, you can run, jump, climb walls and ceilings, as well as throw bells to fight the enemies. Yeah, he throws bells at his enemies instead of fire like on the game's cover. The other 3 characters are Kikira, a princess that got turned into a dragon because of her selfish personality, who can fly for a short period of time, breathe fire, although this fire is shot in an arch-like motion, and can walk on ice. Then you have Gam, the thief who was turned into a golem after he drank a magic potion that he stole from a wizard. He's essentially the tank of the group, with having the most HP, strong attacks with the ability to punch enemies above and in front of him, and can walk on spikes, though he is incredibly slow and can't jump as high as the others. Finally, we have KO, the magical beast, who was the wizard that Gam stole the potion from, and in turn used a different potion to turn himself into a small mouse. He has the lowest HP and can climb like Samson, but can get into small spaces as well as drop bombs. After completing the introduction levels, you will come to the palace where the Emperor tries to send you to fight the main villain, only for you to have to play as Samson and fight against Kikira, as in the story, she claims that she should be the leader as she feels that Samson is too weak. From there, it's the typical side-scrolling action that the NES is known for, but you can select different routes to take as you play the game. Which, don't get me wrong, is fun and creative for the time, but the levels, upon replaying the game, seem to be a little short and aren't as difficult even on the normal setting, which even then, the difference between the easy and normal mode is that there are more enemies and the ending is different. Which does lead to the main problem I find with this game, and that's in order to get the entire story of the game and face the final boss, you have to play the game on the normal setting, which would be fine if you know that going into the game, but if you're like me and didn't know that until you looked it up and played the game on the easy setting, it makes playing the game all the more frustrating when you select the easy mode, get to the end of the game, and realize that you wasted your time and have to start all over again, just to get the actual ending of the game. I get that this was done because games on the NES were super short and they needed a way to extend the playtime of those games, but this gives the game a false sense of length and can be annoying for those who might not want a difficult challenge, even if the normal difficulty isn't that much harder. For a game that is praised for being one of the best on the NES, I do think that it's a very enjoyable game, but there are some issues that hold it back from being great. While the presentation is very good, I think that the gameplay is super average and it doesn't make the game feel special in comparison to others I've played before. That's not to say it's not a game worth playing. I would say that it is a good game to start with if you want to get into NES collecting, but considering how expensive and hard to find it is, which I checked what it goes for on eBay, and let me tell you, when a game's cheapest price is over $400 for a Japanese version, it might be a good idea to find a reproduction cart that's 30 to 50 bucks like I did, or emulate the game to see if you want to own a copy. Overall, I give Little Samson a 6 out of 10. If the game were a little more challenging, the levels were a lot longer, and the game being set at a decent price, then I could see it as the legendary treasure it's been called. However, as is, the game is only worth collecting if you're trying to find every single game to add to your collection. Thanks for watching, I'm Dr. Waluigi, and remember, don't judge a book by its cover, cause you'll never know what's inside. Good night, everyone.